Welcome to the show, Aditya. Let's take it from the top and bring us back to the early days.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's fun to be on this, and big fan. So happy to be here. The first Hive story, in many ways, started with me, having this really interesting aha moment way back when First Hive wasn't even in the picture when I was working with Procter and Gamble, and I remember seeing this Gillette razor on the aisle of a store and thinking, the Gillette razor says I'm a great brand to everybody who walks by. But what if it could say, "Hey Aditya, welcome back. It's the 15th anniversary of your first shave, right?" And if it could do that, what is a broadcast conversation for a brand suddenly transforms into a communication, a conversation between a brand and the consumer, and that can just completely unlock a relationship and growth for the brand and also experience for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
That was I would say, the earliest seed of what I think eventually grew into becoming First Hive in my mind.
That's
Of course,
interesting.
there's a
This,
lot more experiences that added to it, but that, when I think about it, was the first kind of moment that this idea kind of came to mind.
yeah, so let's talk about that. And I want to go back in time a little bit shortly here, and the audience needs to learn about your great track record in building and growing companies before First Hive. But since we're on First Hive first, and your experience at P&G, like what? So what is First Hive, and what is how does that apply to really everything that you've done?
First Hive is a unified customer experience platform that we take to large consumer enterprises. In the enterprise world today, especially in the consumer enterprise world, there are typical enterprise has over 90 different tools and interfaces where they engage with consumers, or they have some store of data.
Hmm.
And because of how cluttered and scattered this data landscape is, enterprises struggle to get control on their customer experience. They struggle to get control on the overall experience that the platforms can deliver for them in terms of real time personalized engagement with customers. And that is really where First Hive comes in. First Hive allows enterprises to really ingest from this entire wide landscape of all of the different tools. We then use our algorithms to connect all of the data that's coming in, and then we really make sure that it's presented together for the enterprise to drive insights, analytics, and really a connected customer experience. In many ways, First Hive is really future proofing these enterprises in their path to what we believe is the future, which is enterprises becoming autonomous as far as marketing and data ops are concerned, where you really get a system of intelligence that kind of delivers a baseline performance for enterprises on their customer experience and marketing.
And where does that fit? Where does that fit into the way that these companies are currently viewing the single lens of the customer, if you will? Like, are you having to educate the market? Is the market already really well aware with lots of players? Like, where is the current market sit in what you do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The need of getting to a single customer view, I think, has been felt by enterprises for a long time, and there've been, multiple, let's say, waves of attempts at solving this problem for the enterprise. Um, whether it is CRMs or even automation, marketing automation tools that came at it, have had approaches to get to this holy grail of single customer view, right? The the challenge, though, was a lot of these tools were structurally flawed on two accounts. One, most of them would look at existing customers and not prospect data. And two, they would almost always deal with customer data which had a known contact vector like an email or a mobile
Hmm.
number attached to that. So when you have multiple sources pushing out a record, let's say, you get Jim's information from five different sources, as long as they have email or mobile of Jim, the tools are essentially doing glorified VLOOKUPs. They're matching the data and saying, okay, this is all Jim. But today's world, you're not always carrying your PII on your sleeve when you have a conversation with a brand. You have multiple devices, you have multiple identities. Uh, a lot of the times you're having anonymous conversations. You don't always have post login conversations. So you could be an existing customer, but you could be having an anonymous conversation with the brand.
Mhm.
All of that volume of data is what the existing landscape does not have the ability to deal with. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it does not even bring that data back in for the enterprise to learn from. It's almost lost. And that is really where a tool like First Step steps in. We had actually rolled out one of the first probabilistic models on identity matching. We do one of the most comprehensive identity graphs with a 5-tiered layered graph that we deliver to enterprises. And that is really where the difference of First Step comes in. The problem is a known problem. In fact, if you look at any large company today and you look at their annual reports, you will see that delivering unified customer experience is almost always the number one growth priority for a lot of these enterprises. And it's an ongoing challenge despite all of the tools. And in fact, that's the reason we exist, because it's a complex, scattered landscape with disconnected stacks.
Interesting. Yeah. And can you share a little bit more about the identity classes of customers that First Hive helps marketers to create, and how you guys are able to help provide this edge over traditional customer segmentation methodology?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The whole philosophy behind First Hive is actually it's a very, very first principles based approach that First Hive takes. The principle is actually really simple. The concept is that if you know the consumer better, you can talk more relevant stuff to the consumer. And if you're able to identify and have these conversations irrespective of where the consumer touches you, you're essentially meaningful and consistent and coherent in all your conversations as a brand with the consumer. And if you're meaningful, coherent, and consistent, and if you're talking with relevance because you know the consumer, there is a higher likelihood of a outcome from those conversations, which is a transaction, growth, experience, and so on. And that is really what First Hive focuses on. So we really process everything from your text, images, voice to transaction data to all of the behavioral events that come in for an enterprise. So we can process data from over 700 different sources of data, tools, and systems. And from all of these, we use our identity metrics to actually create the granular identity for every consumer. Then you have the entire behavioral models to actually create segments, recommendations on where you're likely to respond, what is your content affinity, and so on and so forth. And that is where the segmentation comes in. Now, historically, and this is the direction in which we believe enterprises are headed from an autonomous standpoint, which is where First Step comes in as the platform of choice. Historically, marketers are used to delivering campaigns which are channel focused. So majority of the success KPIs that they would track would be, I'm sending out an email. How many opens am I getting? How many clicks am I getting? Or you're pushing out an ad. How many clicks am I getting? How many people are coming to my website? And then how many check out? So a lot of the campaigns that are sent out, the metrics of success are really channel centric metrics. Very few enterprises today start off saying, I have 25 million consumers for this Thanksgiving offer. Which are the 700,000 consumers I need to respond for this offer? That is not the conversation that you start with. You start with saying, I'm going to send out emails, I'm going to send out texts, I'm going to send out offers on
Mhm.
my web, and each one has metrics, right? Where a First Type comes in is to really flip it on its head and say, look, now that we understand your consumer, we will allow the platform to really help you deliver the right audience for the objective that you have. And then for each of those audience, you don't have to start with broadcast where, you send out one message to everybody on a channel and then you try and nurture that. Instead, if let's say you and I are both on are identified as potential target for a campaign, you might respond better on a mobile notification, whereas I might respond better on, let's say, an email. So it does not have to be two different campaigns. It's part of the same campaign, but the machine is optimizing your preference and my preference for what content, what channel, what time of nudge. You might get a message now, I might get a message on Friday evening. because that is optimized for my response. So
Hmm.
can the machine do that? Absolutely, because it sees the wealth of information that exists on all of your transaction history, all of the lookalikes that exist within my other customers, for me to be able to predict when are you most likely to respond for this context of objective. Could be an education, could be a transaction nudge, and so on and so forth. That is what a first type aims to do, which is to really come in as the brain in the body for the enterprise and really orchestrating that entire unified customer experience for the brand.
Yeah, that really is flipping it on its head. And I want to go back to some of the things that you've done over the course of your career, because I feel like a couple of things. Number one, you're kind of a master of flipping things on their head. You've kind of consistently done that throughout your career. And also, this is kind of the world that you've lived in. So this is not a new problem to you. Ever since the P&G days, like this is something that you've understood and you've experienced. And so I'd just like to talk a little bit about that. You mentioned P&G. Between P&G and First Hive, what was, what did life look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started my career right out of school with PNG. That was an incredible experience with what is probably considered the best marketing org in the world. I was an
Yeah.
incredible few years at PNG, and then I moved to Europe, where I was leading Europe for a few verticals, retail, telecom, manufacturing, with one of the system integrators. And that was a 180 for me personally, because I went from a large brand to a small system integrator, selling large brands, to being in a very very competitive, almost commoditized category of technology solutions, and selling to enterprises versus selling a consumer product, products at PNG. So it was a lot of learning curve for me. Post which I then went to India to co-found a company which was an agency in the a marketing agency, and which was tech enabled. And there we built it as one of the leading players in customer experience and loyalty in the country, servicing over 100 customers across, again, industries, CPG and banking, finance, insurance. So did that. And so again, got a very, very ringside perspective to what happens in the actual execution, and how what I thought was a lot of money was left on the table, because enterprises would spend enormous amount of resources to drive a particular campaign, and then a lot of the data that would get generated, either they were not able to take that back in, or it was just left because they didn't know what to do with it, and there was no ability that existed to use that information back to nurture those relationships that they were building, and then they would start the cycle all over again. And therefore the ROIs, I felt, had tremendous opportunity for uplift. And that
Hmm.
is where we started with First Step, where we said every brand interaction with a consumer, there's an explosion of insights,
Yeah.
right? So our project name for First Hive was actually God, GAWD, not the God, but GAWD.
That's good. Yeah.
It's a pun on God, but we called it a good analyzer of white data, which is, we said, if you have the right antenna to bring those insights into the enterprise, you can unlock information. But if you don't have the right antenna, it's all white noise, right? It's lost forever. So, so that's how First Step started.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and founders out there that are just getting started. Most of you listening are probably a little bit further in your journey, but everyone tends to struggle in creating a strong culture, in getting people aligned to their mission. And I know that that you've had really great experience in getting really great people to join your mission. So I'm just curious, how do you attract top talent to join you at First Hive?
Yeah, no, I think that is probably one of the most important ongoing challenges that any enterprise, I think, at various stages continues to face, um, because it's always the people that make the difference.
Yeah.
Um, I've been lucky in the sense that I have a very good founding team that was there with me from day one of First Hive. and they were also there with me in my previous startup. So that gave me a very, very strong core in the company, around which we could then build a lot of culture. And because we have now worked for many years, there is a tremendous amount of trust and understanding that we have in terms of how we operate. uh, One of the core philosophies for me, at least on organization building, has been that we wanted to build an organization that would last. We were not building this for the short term. You
Hmm.
know, whatever happens, I mean, we might end up having quick exit options. We might go and IPO. All of those are things that we will make choices as we go down. But when we were building the organization, we built it with the philosophy that we are building an organization to last.
Yeah.
And for that, um, having a high integrity, transparent environment was, I think, a critical necessary factor. And so we often talk about the principle of dharma inside the company, where we say every individual is a manifestation of the organization itself within their role. And so you don't need to tell somebody what to do and what not to do. We cannot approach it from the perspective of lack of trust, that if unsupervised you will not perform. We take it the other way, which is that, look, once you come in, our role as an organization is to empower you with information, to equip you with tools, and to ensure that we have provided you the clarity of where the organization is headed, so that once you're there, once you understand this in your role, you're able to wield your authority and your intelligence to take the right decisions for the organization, as though you're the organization yourself, right? And that's a tough philosophy. Sometimes we keep reinforcing it. It's not easy for people to understand that. And what we also learned is, it's as part of the journey, there are always you know categories, folks, all kinds of folks that participate in your journey. Some folks who are committed to the long term, and some who are really smart but join you for a part of the journey. And both have their role to play, and both have the ability to leave a mark and legacy in the of themselves on the organization. So how do we allow them to be able to do their best? And so that has really always been the attempt, and we continue to learn in that journey. I won't say we figured it out. I think that's the intent.
That's a good intent. What are the consistencies of, no matter what the position, what makes a good hire for First Hive?
Uh, so there are two, three core values that I think we really care about. One is someone who takes honest responsibility for the task, right? And a good example here is like the soldier on a battlefield, right? The soldier on a battlefield has a clear objective, right? I mean, let's say they're on the border and they see the enemy. Their objective is to protect the motherland from the enemy, right? You don't give them a cheat sheet to say, hold the rifle like this at 32 degrees angle, click twice. You don't give that cheat sheet. What you tell them is protect the border. So in many ways, that sense of ownership is what we want. They need to understand the purpose and then be able to do what is right,
Hmm.
that they believe is right. And as long as our value systems are aligned, they will do the right things, and they could be learning involved later. So ownership is an extremely important thing. Second is integrity, because ownership with integrity really does the magic. And third is really care about outcomes for the customer, because I think the only way you have a sustainable org is when customers succeed and your team succeeds, is when the organization succeeds. So and sustainability organization of the organization is implicitly built into the success of the customer, because if you are critical to the customer success, your sustainability becomes part of the success of the customer. So, and those three therefore are very intrinsically linked. And so we want our team members to be always focused on customer success, whoever it be, in whichever part of the team. So I think these three are essential behaviors or attitudes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. When you think about a standout hire, right? Someone that has significantly contributed to First Hive's mission. I'm sure that you've got a bunch, but can you share a specific story about someone in particular? You don't need to name any names, but you're more than welcome to, and how that person just completely contributed to First Hive's mission.
Sure, I can. I can name two people at least, right? And I'm not going to talk about some of the folks who always been there, and I won't name people, but there are there are at least two that top of mind come to me. We had one of the team members that we brought in to lead sales for us, for example, in a region, helped us really step jump the way we do our go to market. And in many ways the impact has been such that there's a before and after quality of motion, right? And that is something that you see. And usually when people create that kind of an impact, that impact is not a slow burn. It starts right up as soon as they join the mission. And they really drive everybody around them. They set high expectations and standards for everybody. So that is something that happened. Another really strong partner who's been there with us pretty much from day one is this individual who leads our support. Incredible, disciplined. I mean, he's you can set your clock looking at the way what time he turns up, how he delivers stuff. He's just incredible. It doesn't matter if the deliverable is at 5 a.m. in the morning; it'll be in your inbox, right? So it's one of those things that is one of the personally is one of the most disciplined, dependable person I have known in my entire life across all of the different experiences. I've never known anybody so disciplined and so incredibly passionate about quality of deliverable. When you commit to something, how do you deliver on it? So some of these folks really then have a rub-on effect, right, on everybody else on the organization. They really improve the overall quality of the organization, right? Similarly, we have one of the again founding team members who's been there, who takes on huge number of responsibilities. Like he's almost like our go-to person anywhere, anything we need somebody to give adult supervision. That is a person we go to and say, hey, can you take a look at this? And we've never have him say no, I can't, or no, I won't, no matter what it is, because he's so aligned to the purpose of the org. So we have a lot of such interesting folks. Otherwise, it's a tough mission. I mean, a young startup is not a place that gives you the benefits. It's a place that really takes more from you than it gives initially. So
Yeah.
it takes enormous amount of passion, commitment, and drive to really want to be part of a young startup.
Well, that's well said. And with First Hive being a global organization now, what what challenges have you encountered in creating but also maintaining a unified culture as you guys grew?
That's still early days for us. As you know, we started our operations in the US last year, so it's still early days in that sense, and it's a small team that we have globally versus India. But I think some of the org processes that we have help in reinforcing what we can talk at the time of recruiting people, because at the time of recruitment, whatever we say, eventually the rubber hitting the road is what they experience once they come in. And we have a process called the open house, which we do every week. It's a town hall. It's similar to a town hall. We do it every week. We have peer nominations celebrating success or celebrating any positive impact, really. We have function heads who come in and talk about what they did last week and so on. So and as a founder CEO, I take questions. Anybody has any questions, any input, suggestions? So this, we've been religiously doing it for the last at least 40 months, right, without fail, every Friday. And I think some of these processes go some distance in reinforcing some of these cultural things. um, but it's a constant effort. I don't think, I mean, one of the things I realize now is in my MBA, I should have paid more attention to OB classes. So culture is the most important thing, and it's not easy. It's something that you learn on the job.
Yeah, and it's not a buzzword, right? It's more about the way that you live your life and that you drive
Correct.
your organization. It's not just having a pool table or having a really cool outing. It's the things that you do to maintain unity and
True.
the way you hire to your values, like you mentioned before. things like that. So on that same note, uh, we've all made hiring mistakes, right? And some
Absolutely.
of us learn from those. Some of us don't. I know I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Do you can you just share like some sort of learning experience from a hiring mistake that you've made in the past?
We've made quite a few mistakes. So we all go through the experience where we are dazzled by people in the interviews, but then
Yeah.
subsequently realize that it's not a fit, whether it is competence or culture. And we've had both scenarios where the competence is, I would say, an easier thing to deal with, because then you can figure out, hey, can we support the person, coach them, train them, upgrade their skills. But it's the culture or the attitude issues which are a lot more tougher to deal with. And there's a very interesting Australian saying, and I'm going to give you a uh, my word summary of it, but it really says that, look, if you have a circle of trust, you have to have an extremely high bar of intolerance for anybody who breaks trust.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's poison, right? And something to that effect. And those are things that we've learned the tough way, right? It's one thing to be driven by good value systems, but the enforcement, the boundary conditions have to be very, very strongly enforced, or what is acceptable and not acceptable. Otherwise, you end up setting very wrong precedences, and you allow uh, you know um, uh, unacceptable behaviors to creep into the organization, which then confuse everybody else of, is this what we are now? So I think we've had those scenarios. Another thing that we've learned along the way is, trust has to be um, uh, also earned, especially if you're bringing in folks with who have more authority and influence. Like if you do middle or senior hires, then they have to demonstrate that they're fitting in before we give them more authority, without limiting their ability to do their job well, or to be able to affect, deliver on their priorities. And so that is another thing that we are learning, we are getting better at, I think. But those are some of the areas that we've had learnings
Well,
around.
I want to dig into that last one a little bit because it's interesting, right? Usually, the way that you eloquently said that about having people come in and earn their way despite having an amazing background or a lot of experience, and despite you hiring them for that executive role, they've got to kind of earn their right to influence in a more meaningful way. Can you mind do you have like an example that you can speak to there? Because that one's really interesting. I think people can learn a lot from this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you one of the things that, with one of the hires that we had a few years back, we were very eager to get somebody to lead that function because we were growing rapidly and we needed more competence. One of the things in a startup is, initially you have people who can take on more generalist responsibilities because they're double hatting, triple hatting. As you grow, you start getting more specialists, and you want people who have gone deeper into it. So we brought in this VP into this function, and came in and realized, and this person had worked with larger organizations prior to that, and that was probably a oversight miss from our side on figuring out whether he would have fit in well in a younger, more agile, more let's say fluid environment as a startup was, compared to the larger structured org. So there were a lot of changes that he would recommend, and immediately it meant a lot of tools that we needed to buy, a lot of investments that were asked for, a lot of people. And then the complexity and the space at which the organization were growing in just didn't he couldn't keep pace. And so in, I think, about 4 months, we parted ways, and we were left holding all of the changes, org design changes, investments and tools, and all of that we had made to back the person that we had brought in, right?
Yeah.
But so what we learned from that was that if people are not committed for the long term, they take no responsibility or ownership for what calls they are taking, and they don't see it through. And then as an org, we cannot mold ourselves to the individual, because till they have proven themselves to be participative, to be participating in the long term success of the organization. So they have to, I think that is one of the things that I think we've gotten better at. We will do incremental stuff, but any discontinuous stuff, people have to earn that trust for us to be able to do that, because then we are backing them for the long term, and we know that they are part of this for the long term. There's no definitive way of assessing these two, and therefore it's an organizational memory that works. It's a gut that works, and that is where there's always a scope for misses. But I think that's one of the things that we're trying to get better at, and certainly we've gotten better in the last few years.
That's great. Yeah. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, to other business owners about avoiding or learning from their hiring mistakes?
Generally, advice is pretty presumptuous, because it kind of makes you feel like you know a lot. The fact is, we're very much in our own learning phase. I'll just say that one of the things that I often do in a lot of the important hires is to be very clear about the fact that this is a challenging environment, because it's going to demand a lot of people, and they have to be okay with the pace at which we want things to be done.
Yeah.
We also require, especially in first time at least, that's something that's very intrinsic to our culture. We expect people to operate in the spirit of the purpose rather than the written word of what your KRAs are. The KRAs are important, but the KRAs are intended to be the support. They are not the limitation of what you will do or think about. They're to help demystify a fuzzy cloud into words and keywords, right? But there is the purpose, which is the fuzzy cloud, and we expect people to be comfortable working on the purpose of the organization, which means that you have to be okay with dealing with a certain amount of chaos, a certain amount of stretch, a certain amount of double hatting, because we only have so much capacity in a growing org. And we used to see these uh, I don't know if it is there in any of these Avenger movies, but in those old mythological movies, you would see that you have the bad guy who's throwing a weapon. Let's say it's a fire weapon, then you throw a water weapon against it, right? That's really how a startup is. You get challenges, and then you look inside and you see, okay, where is the competence to take on this opportunity, and you want the best competence to take on the right opportunity. And so we want to be able to work together like that. And so people who are extremely good in structured environments sometimes may not really succeed in our kind of an environment, where we expect people to step up and do more than just one role task or one role or one KRA. And so we're very categorical as to why do you want to join us. We are now less eager to get people in than we were a few years back, because we understand that it has a larger impact if we get the wrong people. It's okay to not have the person than to get somebody who's not a fit.
I have this visual in my head as you were talking about, almost like a Pokemon game. Not to bring us back too far, but like a water animal versus a land one. Or,
What we saw in Elemental now, right? Like water and fire. Yeah, fire people and water people and all. Yeah, it's really like that. I think you have you're constantly. My favorite refrain is that being in a startup is like being the cat in the Schrodinger's experiment. You're both constantly dead and alive. You have lots of opportunity for growth, but you have lots of challenges and threats, and it's you got to find the path to get to greatness. So we're
Thank
constantly
God
trying to
cats
do
have 9 lives then, huh?
that. And you need all of those 9 lives, I
Yes,
think.
you do. Yes, you do. Well, one thing that we talked about previously is this idea of embracing equity. What does embracing equity mean to you as a founder and CEO?
It's you know, the policies of the organization have nothing to do with the personal context of the individual, and have only to do with the purpose of the org. And like I said, I mean, the competence to the opportunity, right? It has nothing else but what is the right uh, what do we say, the right capability that you throw at the right problem, right? Everything else is meaningless. And if you're really trying to truly build a successful org, every participant in that is an asset, right? And you want to make sure that you are giving each asset of yours the opportunity to perform for the organization at the best of their abilities. And um, uh, because you've brought them in, it means that you know that they have the capability to contribute.
Hmm.
Now, once you brought people in, you've done all the assessment before they're inside the door. But once they're inside the door, there is no further figuring out are they right, not right, and so on. You want them to blossom and do the right things, the best that they can. So I think equity is intrinsic into a design like that, where the criteria do not consist of anything to do with the individual's personal context. It has only to do with the capability and the opportunity.
Hmm.
And then it just becomes agnostic to everything else. And that's, I think, the most equitable structure that there is, because it's fair to the collective responsibility that everybody is carrying, and it's fair to the individual.
Yeah. Can you share any steps that that First Hive has made or has taken to foster equity within the organization?
uh, I don't know, I'm thinking, I don't think we have to necessarily, we never felt the need to explicitly take any unique steps, if you know what I mean. It's just how we operate. It's always been how we operate. So there was never anything that we felt that we had to uniquely kind of step up and do something different. Also, I think somewhere this comes from the context in which we started, right? A lot of our operations started in India, which is just intrinsically such a diverse place, right? I mean, we
Hmm.
have people working who speak multiple languages, people who can't understand each other's languages, people who can't read each other's scripts. People come from different places. So 30-40% of our, I think 40% of our workforce is women. So it's a fairly diverse environment. And so to us, that was always like a given. It was not something that we had to step out and say, oh, this is something different that we have to address. It's just a very natural way of life in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we carried forward.
Is that advice you think that other entrepreneurs should heed and pay attention to? Is it's not about creating these major initiatives that are gonna transform your culture because you're gonna all of a sudden overnight be this diversity, equity, and inclusion focused organization. It's more about taking the little steps that are more about like just kind of doing the right thing and focusing on your core values and ingraining who you want to be and the purpose that you want to bring to the world versus like you're in charge of this initiative, which is DEI. Is that something that you think more entrepreneurs should heed?
Again, I can share my perspective. May not really be an advice, because we are in our own journey. The way I think about this, Jim, is a lot of the I think when an organization becomes bigger, you need those focused initiatives, because you need that, again, specialization to ensure that that's carried forward, and you're growing and you're taking care of this consistently, and you're cohesive in every team, and so on. I think when you're still young and small, you will not have the capacity, or sometimes even the necessity, because it's largely close knit and you're able to kind of influence it directly. uh, Now, the need, therefore, at this stage, and my comment is only at the stage that we are in, because once you grow larger, you do need, there's a lot more that you can do. And I have a cousin of mine is working in a very large organization, where she is interning with them on driving diversity and inclusion on recruitment process, for example. Right.
Mhm.
So there are many such specialized areas that you start thinking about. How do I go to, let's say, underrepresented community to make sure that they're given equal opportunities, or and so on and so forth. So there are many such specialized things that you can do. But at the stage that we are in, I think the one thing, if you have a good intent to make a positive impact on the world, the one thing that will aid that is making your company successful, right? Because, and that is the only thing that will make it sustainable and increase the area of impact. If you're doing good, you can do more good if you're successful and if you exist. If you don't exist, everything is just fiction after that, right? And so in that context of the primary driver has to be what's right for the org, and that is where the concept of, I think, the dharma comes in, which is that all of us eventually are there to make the org successful. Because when the org is successful, everybody else is successful. Customers are successful, teams are successful, all the good initiatives that we do around equity or contribution to local communities, all of that becomes more sustainable. And the principle of respect is very intrinsic to how you run. I once heard this very interesting phrase about tolerance versus respect, right? And a lot of the times our response to these initiatives, or what we see in the society as well, is because there was fundamental intolerance, and now therefore there are special initiatives to drive tolerance and respect. Whereas if your fundamental is not of intolerance, you're not correcting some wrong, you're building it as a way of life, then you intrinsically have you have respect, you have mutual respect. So there is no question of tolerance which has to overcome intolerance. It's already there as mutual respect. Everybody for themselves, everybody is unique. You respect the uniqueness, but you're not concerned about the uniqueness. You're singularly only concerned about the success of the org.
Yeah.
That's I know, sorry for the very fuzzy answer, but that's what I think.
Oh, I don't think that was fuzzy at all. I only hope that you can realize that this is, and people can realize that this is advice. It may be unique to your own world, but your unique environment is not that unique for the stage of growth you're at. And I think people listening who are at similar stages of growth should heed that same advice. Like this is a way of being, a way of being human is focus on what your organization needs, who can bring those skills and that aptitude and that attitude to the organization, and certainly focus on being human in your core values, and these other things will just come naturally out of it. I think I'm a firm believer in that, and so hearing you talk about that is special. So I want to hop into one last quick subject before we bounce into our Founder Five, and that subject is really kind of the future of your space and the trends that are happening. And the main question that I have is really kind of simple. I mean, it might be somewhat complex, but I think it's pretty simple. As this world evolves, as the MarTech landscape evolves into what's clearly much more of a single pane of glass of a customer view, how do you see First Hive impacting the path that this unified view of the customer is heading towards? Let's just say, take whatever time cadence you want, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want to take.
See, it's a firm belief that enterprises are on their path to becoming autonomous. What I mean by that is that there is going to be a certain baseline that the machine will deliver, and the humans will operate on top of it. A necessary condition for that is a lot of what we do today, which is you connect into all of the data, bring all the data together, identify consumers, enrich that data, make sure it's available in real time. You can then use it for personalization, marketing, ads, and analytics. But when I gaze ahead and I say, okay, where is all of this headed? And that is a thought that we started First Time with as well. We see that in a few years from now, and we're already seeing the early shoots of it, right? With generative AI and all of these tools that are coming in to autonomously generate creatives or copies and write speeches and all of emails and all of that stuff. That is really where the machine can take over, provided you can give the machine context so it can predict. We are today delivering on First Hive that unified context for the consumer with all of that unified identity. The next piece that we are going to see in the near future is where the machine now starts moving from being reactive to being a proactive controller of this experience, which is where the autonomous capabilities will come in. And at that point, I think we will be there making sure that we are building all of that readiness for the enterprise the day it wants to switch over. And we're already doing some interesting interventions in that space to to start unlocking small features, small steps for the enterprise to move in that direction. But are we headed that way? Absolutely, no question about it. The scale of data, the expectations of consumers, the complexity of interfaces are all pointing to the fact that this will require the machine to optimize, and it's not sustainable for humans to continue to take those gut calls, which lead to low ROI.
Awesome. Yeah. So, all right. So that's a great place to stop. Let's hop into the Founder Five. So, my first question for you here is: what is the top KPI or metric that you are relentlessly focused on?
For us, the number one metric, I mean, apart from revenue and number of customer logos, I would say the number one KPI that we track is events growth, which is essentially the amount of data that we process. That metric becomes the best surrogate for us on growth as well as adoption of the platform. And when we look at ourselves as the brain in the body, the more we are used and consumed, the more value we can create for the enterprise. So that is the number one metric for us: events processed.
Excellent. Second one is a top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
I think this is a tip that I'm giving myself as well as I tell you, which is the customer customer experience, delivering high quality experience to existing customers is as important as acquiring new customers. And because that builds reputation, especially in our space, which we are in enterprise. So in enterprise, reputation precedes everything else, and so that's an extremely important piece. It might sound like a cost for you versus acquisition. The same dollars put in acquisition will give you a few more logos, but delivering great existing customer experience is critical for long term success, and that's one of the big areas of investment for us.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to keep a customer than to get a new one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, favorite book or podcast that's helped you to grow as a founder?
I have a few podcasts, but the one that I really follow in general a lot are the SaaStr podcasts. I really love the SaaStr podcast. Uh, Jason and all videos that I see on SaaStr in general, I take a lot of notes from it. I find Jason incredible. He's very down to earth, very real. The advice that he gives is all very real. So that's something that I derive a lot of value from.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Shout out. All right. Piece of advice that counters traditional wisdom.
Traditional wisdom says fail fast, right? But I don't like the fail fast approach. Fail fast is okay if those experiments are very small, right? But what I'd rather do is do things right the first time, rather than fail fast. So, not to say that velocity of experimentation is not important, but in the space that we are in, which is focused on enterprises, we are an enterprise grade platform. There is no question of failure for us. We got to get it right. We deal with a very high value asset of the enterprises, and we deal with high impact area of enterprises. And so fail fast is not something that is acceptable to us. We don't want to fail, so we want to get it right the first time, every time.
Yeah, got it. All right, last one here. What is going to be the title of your autobiography?
Okay. My favorite quote growing up was, the difference between being successful and not being successful is being exactly right and almost right. So I'd probably borrow from that phase and say, if I write my autobiography and I have hit what I wanted to hit in life, I would probably say from almost right to exactly right.
Nice. That's a great way to end today. Thank you so much for giving back to our audience. I always like to allow for a little bit of self promotion at the end here. So how can those listening help you out?
Um, yeah, I mean, look us up on LinkedIn, and you can follow us on Twitter. There's a lot of great content. And if there are companies that are listening, founders that are listening who are doing anything in the marketing AI space, and you want to collaborate with us, we go to enterprises, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or just email me at aditya@firsthive.com. Happy to collaborate. And if any of you want to, our customer companies that are looking for a great customer experience platform, reach out. We'd love to support you and accelerate your journey of growth.
First Hive, Aditya, the real CDP. And thank you for joining us. This has been incredible. We've loved having you. And man, just have a great rest of your week and keep building.
Thank you, Jim. You have a wonderful one as well. Pleasure
Thanks.
being on this.
Take care.